Thank you, Adrian, and thank you for the introduction. I'm just doing this on my laptop, so I won't be able to view questions or as we go, but maybe if you could pull them together and we could go through them at the end, Adrian. We'll work on that anyway.
Great.
Okay, so to kick us off, I'm sure we're speaking to a largely a Melbourne-based or surrounding Melbourne audience, so I'm sure you're familiar with the Metro network, but we'll take a little bit of an overview at what that is and what makes up the Metro rail network anyway. And then we'll spend some time, there may be some people in the audience that are wondering, what are these biosites and what makes them so significant, particularly within the Metro rail network. So we'll go into a little bit of history about that as well to set the scene. We'll look at the biodiversity journey as such that Metro has been on in this current franchise period since we started it in 2017 and what's some of the initiatives we're doing as part of that program. We'll also spend some time, I'm sure you're all aware of the infrastructure program or the big build as it's known that's happening across Melbourne. It's almost impossible to avoid it. And we'll look at some of the ecological studies that have been undertaken as part of that program and how we've been able to leverage that, the data that's been captured from that program to support management of those values essentially. And then finally, we'll spend a bit of time and we'll focus on this a little bit actually because it's relevant to grasslands in the western part of our network and I'm sure of great interest to many people in the audience. Some of the initiatives that we're working on moving forward, including a direct seeding trial that we just delivered a couple of weeks ago and moving into the initial maintenance phase of that, as well as the larger grassland restoration program that trial is looking to support or inform, in fact. Okay, so just to set the scene a little bit, the Melbourne Metro network, as we can see in the image on the right, is made up of around 430 kilometres of rail corridor that's spread out across a little over 3,000 hectares of land. And that area is known as the Metro Infrastructure Lease.
Sorry, we have a glitch. I think your slides aren't changing on my screen. If you've moved to a second or third slide, we're still on the first slide.
Okay, yeah, this is not working at all, is it?
Oh yeah, now that worked. Whatever you just did then, changed it. We're on stage 2 now.
Yeah. So you can see that. What if can you see that?
No, it's still the same.
And that.
Still the same.
So maybe I'll just stay in. I know it's annoying and you can't see the detail, but stay in that mode because that seems to be working.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Sorry about this. This is not ideal. Can you see that next slide?
Yes, you're on slide 3 now. Yes.
Okay. We'll just stick with this, and I know it's not ideal, but it's working. So as I was mentioning, yeah, so 430 kilometres of rail corridor. If we were to stretch that out into a straight line, it's essentially the distance of Melbourne to Mount Gambier, for some context. In terms of what makes up the Metro rail corridor, so it varies in width from 25 to 40 metres wide, and that's essentially in flatter, straighter areas, it tends to be wider, and that's also where a number of rail operators occur. So there might be 2 or 3 different rail operators in those wider parts of the network. In comparison to the hilly and windy parts of the network, particularly in the northeast areas where they go through cuttings where they tend to be narrower. As you can see in the image, it forms a radial layout similar to the spokes on a wheel that sort of span out from a central hub, being the Melbourne CBD. And most of the lines are around 30 kilometres in length, with the exception of the 2 in the southeast, which are almost double that. That image on the right actually is the bioregions that make up the Melbourne and surrounding areas. And as we can see, it's quite a bit biogeographically diverse area with 4 bioregions occurring within a relatively short distance of each other. So if we think of each of those bioregions having their own or shared environmental history, that being a unique geology, soil type, and sometimes unique habitat types, it goes some way to painting the picture of how we have quite a biodiverse area within a relatively short distance of each other in the Melbourne and surrounding district. So if we overlay a linear network such as the rail network over the top of that, we can start to get build a picture on the importance that linear infrastructure like this has in connecting those habitat types. This next slide, I've put together, so there may be some people in the audience that aren't as familiar with what biosites are and their significance as some others. So I simply put this slide together to provide a little bit of context or some history on these sites. I make the caveat that it is very much an incomplete history. I've tried to cram a lot into one slide, as you can see. And yeah, it is a very simplified form. So there was notes of the significance of the grasslands occurring within the rail reserve as early as the early 1900s. And there's also notes around the use of periodic burning, probably at that time to manage fuel loads, and particularly on in grassland habitat types, noting that at that time it was obviously steam locomotives that were used, which were prone to throwing out sparks and embers. So regular grass fires were a genuine risk. So there was burning done to mitigate that risk. And moving forward into the 1960s, when there was a study done by Groves that really was an important study to improve our understanding of thematic grasslands and grassland flora in general. And in fact, that image that is underneath that 1965 is of the grassland at St Albans, which I understand, which was a key part of that study in the 1960s. So I guess where I'm going there is it's not only the ecological values that makes these areas quite important, but also some of the, from an academic and research perspective, in us understanding how grasslands function and the characteristics of grasslands. These sites have also been quite important in gaining that understanding. Moving forward into the 70s, and Stuart Parsons noted that the regular and in some cases annual use of fire in the rail reserves promoted healthy native grasslands, and that was in comparison to comparable grasslands in agricultural and road reserves that may not have been subject to that same regular burning activity. So we're starting to build a bit of a picture here of how grasslands function and work, and some of the important components of that make up those systems, including regular burning. Moving forward into the 80s and early 90s, where there was a growing understanding of some of the threats that occurred to some of the vegetation and habitat types within Victoria, namely the grasslands and grassy woodlands. And there was a concerted effort put in by the Victorian Environment Department at the time to further understand and map where these locations occurred across Greater Melbourne and indeed across Victoria. And I've listed some of those key studies that now form our understanding of where these significant sites occur. Moving forward into the 2000s, when the former DNRE sought to compile these many independent studies that have been done to understand these significant locations, and that was a report known as the Sites of Biodiversity Significance in the Port Phillip and Western Port region. And as I mentioned there, it sought to compile 1,500 separate past reports that had documented these sites over the previous couple of decades. So that's sort of, yeah, as I said, a very brief summary of how these sites, known as biosites, came about, and some of the reasons why they're so significant. This is just a simple graphic to show where the biosites generally occur within the metro network, and probably of no great surprise to people tuning in that they tend to occur where our grassland vegetation types and grassy woodland vegetation types occur within Greater Melbourne. Mostly on the Sunbury line. So of the 30 biosites that we're aware of when we started the franchise in 2018, 2/3 or around 20 of those occur on the Sunbury line, with the remaining sort of occurring in the southeastern parts of the network, across the Pakenham, Cranbourne, and a couple on the Stony Point line as well. We've also got one on the Werribee line, a significant site at near Leverton, and a couple on the Craigieburn line at Coolaroo as well. And there's just a bit more detailed picture on that, so you can start to see the cluster of sites, generally from those familiar with the Sunbury line, Water Garden Station heading out to Sunbury, or Calder Park heading out to Sunbury. And in the southeast, tend to be a cluster sort of from Berwick out, with a cluster being around Officer and Pakenham and those kind of places. Okay, so a little bit about Metro and sort of what makes up Metro. So for those that may not know, Metro is made up of a consortium of, MTM is made up of a consortium of shareholders, and they were successful in winning a bid to operate the Metropolitan Rail Network for a 7-year lease period. It's known as the Metro Infrastructure Lease, with the option of a 3-year extension, and we're just about to move into that contract extension in the next financial year. As part of that franchise bid, Metro made a commitment to maintain and improve the condition of the biosites that they were aware of within the Metro network at the time. So essentially, that's how this biosite management program came about. As I mentioned at the start of the franchise, there was known to be about 30 biosites within the Metro network. As I mentioned, 2/3 of those occurring on the Sunbury line. Okay, so fast forward, Metro was successful in their bid to operate the network, so they needed to come good on this commitment to manage these biosites. And it was in some cases, it was very much a case of where do we even start? At the time, I was not working for Metro. I was actually an ecological consultant, and to come full circle, I was engaged by Metro to do the baselining for this program, to understand where the biosites were, what condition they were in, and so forth, and to write a management plan. So I've sort of come full circle where I now work for Metro delivering this program. And when we were doing the baseline assessment, we sought to describe the sites in terms of where they were, what the values that were thought to be within these sites. To do that baselining exercise, we used the Victorian Habitat Hectare method, as well as a couple of other data collection metrics. We also did some threatened species validation for what we're aware of what was supposed to be within these sites at the time, as well as any other species we thought there was a likelihood of occurring within these sites. We recorded species composition and species richness. We sought to understand the key risks at the site in terms of weed type and cover, as well as other key management activities such as pest animals, as well as other risks, such as forward driving, third-party trespassing, as well as other things. One of the key things that we really needed to do at this baselining exercise was just to map where the sites occurred. So as some of you may be aware, on the Sunbury line, the sites are really well defined. They've had fences erected and maintained around them for, I'm assuming, probably since the 90s, I'm expecting. And to some extent, they've been managed, whether on a volunteer basis or in some cases by DSE and their predecessors as well, at different points over the last 2 or 3 decades. So they were relatively well known within the community. Some of them had signs and were fenced, and their extent was really well known. In total comparison to the southeastern parts of the network, where we're pretty much starting from scratch. They weren't fenced. The mapping that we had, which indicated where the sites were supposed to be, was, incorrect in a lot of cases. They were actually on the other side of the line of where they were said they were supposed to be, and sometimes a couple of hundred. We now know a couple of 100 meters away from where the values actually are. We also sought to understand the level of protection at the site. As I mentioned, some were fenced. What condition the fence was in. Did it need upgrading? Did it need replacing altogether? And recommendations for further studies to further understand the values at these sites, which we've been chipping away at throughout the program. Once we gathered all this baseline data, we worked away at developing a management plan to maintain and improve the values at these sites throughout the lease period. And what was quite key to this program is that it needs to be adaptive to seasonal variability, but also how the sites were responding to the management activities that we're proposing at the sites. Were the management activities being successful? Did we need to change things up? It also had a scheduled monitoring program, and it also had clear targets and objectives, so we could measure that performance at the sites against. But also, sort of looking back in hindsight, what was quite key to that management plan was our ability to have a level of flexibility within it to really lean into the acquired knowledge and skill that exists within our land management practitioners that we're lucky enough to have within our land management practitioners within the Melbourne and surrounding areas. I've touched on some of the challenges that we face in that baseline exercise, but just a couple more on that. So one of the challenges was the variability between the sites, the size and their conditions. So for example, on the Sunbury line, we had several sites that were really high quality plains grassland vegetation type that had relatively good quality fences around them that were serving a purpose. And in some cases, 5 to 6 different threatened species. The Calder Park site had over 400 individuals of spiny rice flower at the time. Actually, I think it was 200 at the time, now has 400, compared to some really highly degraded sites in the southeastern part of the network, as I mentioned, where they didn't even have any a patch of native veg, as it's referred to, no fence, and we kind of were left scratching our heads as to what the sites were meant to be there for. The size of the sites, so there's a site at Calder Park that is as small as 800 square metres. It's got a small population of spiny rice flower in it and a couple of other scattered grassland species. In comparison to a site on the Stony Point line, which is over 17 hectares in size and is spread out over 3.5 kilometres of line. The example that site at Calder Park, it pretty much only has threatened species in it, spiny rice flower in it. There's not many other flora species in it compared to some really high value sites. There's variability in the threats that we need to manage at the site. So we have a couple of sites at Pakenham, which is habitat that have a known population of southern brown bandicoot within them. And when we started the program, it was almost wall to wall, 80% cover of gorse and blackberry, essentially. And the challenges of that site, it's got a population of spiny rice flower in it that were using the woody weeds at the time for their habitat. That's probably the only reason they occurred in that part of the corridor. But there's also a range of threatened flora species that were known to occur at that site. So to manage the threatened flora, we needed to almost take away the habitat, the species that were providing the habitat for those for the southern brown bandicoot. And I'll touch on that in a slide later on to explain how we've gone about that. The varying vegetation types, and of course the limitations that come with doing all this work within an active rail corridor. So what are some of the activities that we're doing in these sites? So as we know, one of the key management activities in grassland and grassy woodland systems is managing biomass levels. So the key way that the main way that we do that is through an ecological burning program. We generally burn between 7 and 10 sites every year, and I think we've got about two sites to go on that. We've had a really successful burning program this year with really stable weather, as you've noticed over the last couple of weeks. And in some sites where we can't do burning, we use mechanical means to manage biomass levels. In the early phases of the program, it was a concerted effort on weed control, as you can imagine. As we're moving into the 7th year, we're getting to a phase where we're able to concentrate a little bit more on enhancing the sites with some revegetation efforts. And with many of the sites containing significant threatened species, we also do concerted management around threatened species management. Pest animal management, as I mentioned, so rabbit and foxes, maintaining or installing new protective fencing. As I mentioned, we're moving more into a revegetation phase of the program now that we've largely moved into more of a maintenance phase of weed management, which is pleasing. That image in the bottom right there is a bandicoot hide or shelter that we've used at that Pakenham site, where we've, in a staged approach, removed the woody weed threat, and in order to maintain or continue to provide habitat for the bandicoots, we've put a series of these bandicoot shelters in. The image up the top there is the same site, and you can see the revegetation in the background. Okay, so as I mentioned, we had a monitoring program built into the management plan. Although we do annual monitoring at the end of each financial year to record how we've performed against the targets for that year, we also have the main monitoring events that we do. We had a mid-franchise or a mid-term monitoring event, and we're preparing for our end-of-franchise monitoring event in next financial year. So in the mid-term event that we did in 2022, I think it was quite pleasing, the results, and a little bit beyond our expectations, actually, how far the sites had come. So some of the key metrics that we pulled out of that event were we've increased the threatened species abundance across the sites by 314%. We've recovered 3 ecological communities. Not to say that the key components of those communities weren't obviously they were always present at each site. It's just that the sites were in the condition they were in at the start of the program didn't meet the minimum condition thresholds to be considered those communities. So we've now elevated the condition of these sites to be now meet those thresholds. 5 threatened species recorded at the sites that weren't recorded at the baseline monitoring event. Again, the species were obviously always there. That just the condition wasn't as such to allow them to be present in that baselining exercise. But by far and away, the biggest achievement that we've recorded or that we've had in this program is the introduction or reintroduction of ecological burning as a business as usual activity. As I said, we burn 7 to 10 sites every year, generally on a 4 to 6 year burning cycle in our grassland sites. And without that being implemented, we would never have recorded some of those achievements that I've just mentioned. And just by having the program in place, we've really, built community partnerships across with different community groups across the network. Just a little bit of follow on some of those achievements. So basalt podolepis, we've increased in abundance from up to 415 plants across 4 sites. Spiny rice flower, around 590 plants across 10 sites. Spiny rice flower is our most widely distributed threatened species, occurring at 10 sites across the northwestern parts of the network. Similarly, you guys can see the numbers there for matted flaxlily and arching flaxlily, as well as dense leek orchid down at our Stony Point biosite. For the plant nerds that are tuning in, I thought I would need to put in a slide, a graph to keep everyone happy. And this simply shows the increased abundance of spiny rice flower, just to pull out one species, compared to baseline, the baseline survey. So that the first two sites that we can see there in the greatest increase is at our Calder Park sites, which some of you may be familiar with, where we have our biggest population of spiny rice flower. We've gone from around 150 plants to up around 400 plants, so more than doubled the size of that population. Having chatted to Debbie Reynolds on the results of this, she thinks that, or understands that it's likely that they're not new germinates, that they're likely existing plants or rootstock that were always present. It's just that now that we've got the burning program in place and able to open up the system again, that we're providing the opportunity for these for the plants that may have been dormant or just not able to grow to now be visible. But also just by opening up the intertussock space, we can actually see the plants where we couldn't do that when it was quite dense and being unmanaged to some extent. That site in the middle there was another bit of a spike, is our large biosite on the Werribee line near Williams Landing. See if this works now. It's not in. So this is a burn that we did just about 3 weeks ago, actually, at our Calder Park site, where we had that where we've got that big spiny rice flower population. I'll just let this play. At this site, we're actually moving into burning sites that were originally burnt in the first year of the program, so in 2017. So we've come full circle in our burning cycle. As you can see in that image there, we're doing it in a mosaic or staged approach. So if I can just go back. As you can see, that half or portion on the right there was burnt in 2022 off the top of my head. And this part on the left was, originally burnt in 2017. And we're now going back into that cycle where we're burning it again. This side is sort of broken, although, we say we're doing a mosaic burn because of the linear nature of these sites and reserves. It's almost a structured pattern, if you like. And if you look at it aerially, or I keep a burn diary of areas that we've burned over the years, it almost looks like a patchwork quilt where we've sort of burnt one quarter one year and alternate quarters in subsequent years. So it's much more structured, than a typical mosaic burn. Moving on to how we've been able to leverage data that's been acquired through the big build. So this has been really important for filling in key data gaps in our understanding of biodiversity values across the network. When we started the franchise, we knew about the biosites, and we're continuing to grow our understanding of those. But at the time, they were considered to be the known knowns of biodiversity values in the network. And pretty much the rest of the network were what we considered to be the known unknowns. We didn't know a great much about it. But probably to no surprise to many people in the audience, there was obviously likely that values occurred within the rest of the network. There's just never been a reason to go looking for them. There's never been a project or key maintenance activities in those parts of the network to look for them. And fortunately, through the big build, as I said, there's been a concerted survey effort gone into understand the ecological values to inform impact assessments and designing these projects. And we've been able to leverage that data to better understand the biodiversity values across the network. And that's allowed Metro to better manage our biodiversity risks. So, doing informed planning for project and maintenance and renewal activities. It's quite a significant catalogue of biodiversity data now that we're able to reshare back out into those projects so that they can use it for planning for future works or projects. And as I said, sharing with other agencies for improved outcomes. Through our greater understanding of the values across the network now, we've identified a bunch of new places that contain threatened species across the network, and that's allowed us to, in a staged approach, establish new biosites, essentially. I know the term biosite comes from work that was done through Victorian Environment Department over the years, but we've continued to use that term because it tends to mean something within the rail industry, maybe because there's so many biosites that occur within rail land. So rather than sort of looking to confuse the point, we've just sort of kept that same terminology for these new sites. So we'll be looking at we've already established a whole bunch, but I think it's around 39 new sites over the next few years. We've established 22 over the past 2 years. So we'll almost double the size of the program from what we've started. Most of these new sites are relatively small. There's an example of one on the right-hand side there, which is on the Hurstbridge line. Because these sites are they're quite small because they generally protect just a single population of, in this case, matted flax lily. And that population of matted flax lily was actually picked up through studies that were done for the North East Link, which we know is being built at the moment. So that's an example. To provide another example of how we've been able to really advance our understanding of biodiversity values across the network, the image of the right is what we consider to be our data gaps of native vegetation mapping across the network. So the red being data gaps, and that's just I've taken that from the 2005 EVC modelling, and the blue represents native vegetation mapping. Native vegetation mapping that we had at the start of the program. So we had mapping generally just for the Pakenham, Cranbourne and Stony Point lines. Fast forward that to the image on the right, we've almost got a complete, there's not much red left. We've almost got a complete picture of the native vegetation, ground truth, condition and type native vegetation mapping across the network. This slide's a little bit outdated. Those gaps that I've got circled in red there, we've actually closed over the last spring and summer. We commissioned some surveys to close those data gaps. Okay, so what's next? So as I mentioned, we're establishing a whole bunch of new biosites. We've done about 22 so far over the last 2 years. So fencing these sites out, our existing land management contractors are progressively developing management plans and starting to manage these sites. And we've got about 10 to do over the next couple of years. Depending on the significance of the site, we generally wait till the project gets handed over back into operation to Metro before we start managing them. But if it's a really significant site, we'll jump in while the program's being undertaken to start protecting and managing those values. As indicated before, we're establishing a native grassland direct seeding trial, which is directly adjacent to a grassland biosite that we have at St Albans. And we're partnering with the University of Melbourne, as we know, are sort of pioneers in the direct seeding methodology to implement that trial. We did the seeding about 2 weeks ago, I think. And the reason we're doing that trial is really to inform how we deliver a larger grassland restoration project, which is looking to connect parts of biosites on the Sunbury line together. So as you may know, some biosites on the Sunbury line are fragmented into 2, 3 or 4 sort of fence sections, if you like. So we're looking to join those gaps to improve connectivity within biosites, but also looking to enhance the degraded patches within biosites as well. The grassland direct seeding trial. So the key objectives, as I mentioned, is to inform the methods that we'll use for a larger restoration project on the Sunbury line. Based on the scrape and sow method that has been trialled and used in Western Victoria, many of you may know, on a couple of roadsides in Western Victoria around Warrendoo and Lake Bolac. We're seeking to replicate those techniques as much as possible. As part of the trial, we're also looking to understand the potential constraints of delivering such a program within an active rail network. And although we've only just done the seeding 2 weeks ago, we've already learnt so much in terms of how to manage those those constraints, if you like, and take those into the next project. So just for those that are familiar with sort of this part of St Albans, the red sort of transparent areas is the existing biosite that we have on St Albans Road, and the trial is the mauve section. Almost, it starts at the Western Ring Road overpass on St Albans Road. What are we doing as part of the trial? This is quite key, I guess. So we're trialling two soil preparation techniques. So the soil scalping method, which you may be familiar with. We're also looking at a technique known as clay capping. So effectively to achieve the same objectives, those being to remove the weed. So this area that we're implementing the trial was a degraded grassland, probably 95% exotic grasses. So we're looking to remove the weed seed bank that's built up over time, as well as the elevated soil nutrients that have built up in the upper part of the soil profile. So as you probably know, the exotic grasses are quite productive, particularly on the Victorian volcanic plain. And over years of these areas, particularly within the rail corridor, being mowed on a regular basis, the dead plant material and biomass sort of decomposes and go back into the upper soil profile, elevating the soil nutrients in there, again favouring weed growth. And we're also trialling the reuse of, so to do that capping part of the trial, we're reusing construction spoil or subsurface clay that's been taken from a rail project close to the trial site. So we're sort of trialling the use of that as well. The reason why we're trialling the two soil preparation methods is to have a couple of options up our sleeve, I suppose. So one of the constraints that go with doing this type of work in the rail corridor is that there's a whole bunch of underground services such as signalling and electricity, water and other services, sewage in some cases, that occur within the rail corridor. And that limits our ability to excavate in some parts of the corridor. So we're looking to have a range of tools or techniques up our sleeve that we can employ in areas like that. Being the volcanic nature of this soil type as well, as you'd know, there's in some cases surface rock or rock pretty close to the surface that may limit our ability to do the scrape and sow method as well. We're trialling two different seed mixes. So a mix that we're referring to as the biodiversity mix. So it's made up of 6 grass species and around 30 forb and subshrub species. So looking to replicate the original species composition for these sites as much as we can. We're also trialling what we're referring to as a maintenance mix, which is quite a simple mix that's grass dominated. As an alternative for construction projects to use within the rail corridor when they're reseeding or re-establishing greenfield sites back into grassy areas within the rail corridor that will go through the periodic mowing program that occurs within the rail corridor. So that we're trialling a seed mix that can withstand that regular mowing maintenance program. As I mentioned, we're seeking to understand the potential constraints of doing such a project within an active rail corridor. So this is a general layout of our trial. So as you can see, 50% using the scalping soil preparation method and 50% capping. The two different seed mixes or treatments, as well as we're also trialling the use of burning in comparison to mechanical biomass reduction. I'm now going to jump to a slideshow to sort of
I think we might have lost you there, Ben. Can't hear you. Unless it's me.
Shows how we went about the trial. And I'm just make sure I've still got you there, Adrian.
You did come back and now you've gone again. Oh, you're back again. Yep, you're still cutting out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, quite silent.
Okay. Yep. Sorry. Yep. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Oh, you're back
Okay.
now, though. So there you go. Sunspots, we'll blame it on.
Yep. Is that
Yeah, you're good now.
slideshow coming up? Is the
Yes,
slideshow coming up?
I can see the first slide of the slideshow. That's all.
Oh, okay. No worries. New share. Window. There we go. Share. How's that?
Well, that
Excellent.
looks like some scraping happening.
Yep,
Something's
perfect.
going on.
Okay, thank you. I'll okay, as I said, I'll just flick through this slideshow and speak to it as we go. So this is where we've done the soil scraping. So we've had an excavator on site, and we're scraping to 200 mil. We actually started at 150 millimeters, that is. With the key objective, we're thinking that we've got kikuyu at the site, so we're looking to go deep enough to remove the rhizomes of kikuyu, but it turns out that the bigger risk at this site was the phalaris, which you can see in the foreground, and really deep rhizomes. So we increased the depth to 200 millimeters. A bit more scalping and more scalping. As you can see, that's a, a phalaris tussock that's been left 2 weeks later. Unfortunately, we didn't, and they've already started to germinate. So we'll be taking care of that over the next couple of months. One of the challenges with this, as you can appreciate, in this environment, the sort of slightly undulating. So although the excavator bucket is sort of targeting 200 millimeters, there'll be some areas that are slightly deeper than that. So they might sort of get underneath the bucket, if you like, which is a challenge. One of the unexpected finds in this area, you can see the rail ballast on the right-hand side there where my cursor is. So it'll be interesting to see how I'm expecting that a different species composition will grow in that part of the trial compared to further to the left where it's a more clay soil type. This is the capping material being brought in from a nearby rail project, and spreading of the material. That's sort of just to show the difference in. It's the stockpile of material that we sourced, and the Uni of Melbourne researchers testing the stockpile. Setting up the trial a couple of weeks ago with a beautiful smoke haze, afternoon smoke haze in the background. Mixing the seed on site. That's the seed mix. And we used a building sand to bulk out the seed mix to help with spreading it. We used some legumes in the seed mix, so a smoke water treatment. See, and now we're into the watering phase. So we've set up a sprinkler system for that. That's after a hard day's work of seeding. I had these sites in my camera, so this might be of interest to some people. I thought I'd just flick through these as well. I'm sure people might be familiar with this site. This is the Diggers Rest Grassland Reserve, and we've recently just extended it both north and south of the original area to include some lesser quality patches of grassland, but we're having a go at improving them.
Is that a gate?
It is, yeah, for our guys to get into.
Fantastic.
I think that was Debbie. That's the original biosite, as seen on the Gardening Australia show a couple of years ago. One of the challenges that we have at that site, we can't keep the forward drivers out despite our best efforts, and they've recently just knocked out one of my posts and broken a wires that I've got to fix. We also extended it to the south to take in a population of Dinella longifolia vagrandis, which we might see in the next slide in there somewhere. And that's really improved that site since we started managing it in the last couple of years.
But are we going to lose some of that site with the overpass or underpass, Ben?
Not to my understanding, Debbie. I haven't seen the detailed design yet, but I think it's going to be further towards Watson's Road.
Okay.
They certainly know about it, so hopefully not. Okay, I'll stop sharing that one. I'll go back into the presentation. So for those not as familiar with what the end result of the direct seeding looks like, John Del Pratt has kindly given me permission to use some of his photos from a direct seeding trial that he's been a part of out at Warrandoo with the Warrandoo Landcare Group. So they did a number of roadsides at Warrandoo, and in this case, I think they scalped to 10 centimetres, and the project was of scale that they used a direct seeding machine, as you can see there. The image on the right is 5 months post-sowing from a site done in 2020. That same site, 14 months post-sowing in the top right. The bottom right is a different site that was done in 2013, and that's 5 years post-sowing. I think that's Leucochrysum albicans in the foreground. So quite a mature-looking grassland, species-rich grassland. That same site, 7 years post-sowing in the top right. And in the bottom right, I think Catherine has presented at an earlier Grassy Talk series, but that's, I think, one of her sites at Royal Park to give an urban context of this application. As part of our partnership with the Uni of Melbourne, they grew the forb and subshrub seeds for this trial at the seed production area at their Burnley campus. So that's just some images there. As part of the trial, we did germination testing on the forb and grass seeds too as well, which has gone into informing the quantities of seed that we've used in the seeding mix. Okay, you may be hanging out to understand a bit more about the bigger project that we're planning on the Sunbury line. I was a little bit hesitant about including too much information on this because I haven't signed the contract yet. We're going through the contract phase at the moment, so we're 90% there, and fingers crossed it continues to go well. I haven't got the money yet either, so I'm sort of a bit hesitant to provide too much information. But essentially, in summary, the Sunbury line upgrade, which has happened over the last 3 or 4 years to upgrade the Sunbury line to be able to take the bigger high capacity metro trains, which is the trains that will operate through the metro tunnel. There was a range of upgrades that had to happen. As you can appreciate, the trains are bigger and taller, they're longer, so the stations had to be lengthened. The platforms had to be lengthened. The overhead gantries and wires had to be increased in height, and there was a whole bunch of associated works that had to be done to support those bigger trains. A bunch of new electrical substations had to be built as well because they require more electricity. And as part of that project, they had a sustainability criteria within the contract. They used the infrastructure sustainability framework to measure their sustainability performance, and to do that, as one of the initiatives that they proposed was a biodiversity initiative. It was almost a natural fit within the within the Sunbury line, being such a significant metro line for biodiversity values. So it was sort of quite a natural fit to come up with a big biodiversity initiative. And that initiative, as I mentioned earlier, is to enhance 3 hectares of grassland through a combination of connecting fragmented parts of existing biosites together, as well as enhancing degraded parts within existing biosites. And in the bottom right, there is our biosite at Sydenham. Those that are familiar with the site, they know that it's broken into 3 fenced areas. So the mauve coloured sections in the middle is our proposal to connect those together through this direct seeding method. Another site that we've chosen is our South Sunbury site, quite a significant site in terms of its size and extent, but also quality and the threatened species that it supports. So you can see there the sort of transparent red areas are the existing parts of the biosite, and the mauve parts are what we're proposing to connect. At the southern part, we're also proposing to connect it into the Harpers Creek as well, which flows down into Jackson's Creek. I'd like to acknowledge a few people in pulling this presentation together. Debbie, who I think we heard about for her endless knowledge on spider rice flower and her support. Michael Longmore for his ongoing support in grassland restoration advice. John Morgan, who provided me some information on the background of the biosites, as well as the historical burning program within the rail reserves. Nick Williams from Melbourne Uni for his direct seeding support, John Del Pratt as well. Vanessa Craigie, who I spoke to once or twice about her background on these biosites, and Akash for some excellent fauna images that we saw earlier. And that's it.
Magnificent. Thank you very much, Ben. That was very informative and quite exciting, needless to say. Great to see that work going ahead, and it's how good is it that biodiversity is locked into your contracts? That's a great way of ensuring that management actually happens and so on, and that you're developing these things. So it's really quite far-sighted. So yeah, thank you very, very much for that. Are there anyone here who we've got questions in the chat, but does anyone want to say anything to start us off with some questions? Otherwise, sorry, I'll find the chat, which has just vanished from the screen for some reason, because it wouldn't be right to not have all of these hiccups going on in this one talk. Can you talk to us a bit, Ben, about like your definition of a biosite? Does it have to have threatened species in it, or are you being more generous with your the areas that you're beginning to fence off and protect?
Yeah, great question, Adrian, and it's quite timely. So as I mentioned, with all these new areas of biodiversity value being made aware to Metro through the studies that have been done, we developed or almost finalised a biosite establishment procedure. So, and we've really lent into the criteria that were established in 2004 by DSE at the time, which, you know, it's what's it, 20 years old, but it's still quite a relevant document in terms of providing the criteria and criteria for assigning a biosite, but also the category for the level of significance of the biosite, I guess. So we've largely just sought to replicate that method. I had a great chat with Graham Lorimer, who's been a great support as well, for the work that he's done in Knox City Council as well as Maroondah, and he, I think he's just updated those sites of biodiversity significance within Maroondah. So he's used that 2004 methodology, biosite methodology in that as well. So yeah, I've sought to do that.
Yeah, okay. It's still quite a high bar, I guess. It's it'd be not nice to see the lower quality stuff getting a bit of love too. But I'm sure you will get around to that in your next contract, perhaps. It's people were wanting to know a little bit about the source of your seed for your direct seeding trial.
Yeah, sure. So for the trial, as I mentioned, Uni Melbourne Burnley campus grew the 4 seed for us because they had the infrastructure there, and we're doing it for a number of other programs that they're running throughout Melbourne. So that was a bit of an easy go-to. And for the grass seed, we purchased off a commercial grower, native
Right.
seeds,
Okay. Cutting out a little bit.
just the seed from.
Yeah. Okay. In the future, like
Um,
once your contract finishes, will there be management of your how will we know that management will be insured into the future?
big
Your
program.
no, your connection's really, really poor all of a sudden. That's what else may I ask you? Sorry, we can't hear at the moment.
We've done seed collect. No, although we haven't signed the contract yet, I know it's sort of in the pipelines. So
we'll take it. We'll take it as commercial in confidence then for the for the moment. It's the MR.
is that any better, Adrian?
Yes, it is suddenly. Indeed.
Good. I just changed my Wi-Fi's, so hopefully that's a bit better. Yeah, I broke out a little bit your last question, but I think I got the gist of it enough to answer the question, or attempt to answer the question. It's a good question, and one that we're sort of asking internally ourselves. So, what does that look like? So, yeah, I guess we understand from I'm sort of trying to answer this without giving too much away, but we understand that the tender for the next contract will be looking for bids that improve on the current program. I guess not going backwards, so advancing on what we're currently delivering. That's what we've been told. I'll still be here. My colleagues will still be here. It'll be the same. You can't replace 7,000 people overnight, so understand that it'll essentially be the same with just different shareholders.
Okay. Catherine asks how long you're giving yourself to do 3 years of restoration on the Sunbury line. Are you going to wind that up by your 3-year extension? Was it 3 years extension period?
Yeah, that's right. The original proposal for that program was to be delivered over a 10-year period, but because of it was also meant to be started 2 or 3 years ago, but because of the complexities of changing franchisee and shareholders and so forth, we're going to deliver it over 2 years. So our franchise ends in June 26. So yeah, the trial that we've just done will contribute towards part of that 3 hectares as well. So I'm sort of planning ahead for that.
Yeah, you've got your work cut out for you, I expect. Can you just briefly explain to us the different rail operators that exist across the network? So there's the ARTC, there's you guys. You have different. Sometimes you're on the same track, sometimes you're on different tracks. I get very confused.
Yeah, no worries. And V-Line, of course, our regional operator. So yeah, generally the only lines that they occur is, or where one or more of us occur is Werribee, Sunbury, Craigieburn, and Pakenham lines. So we all exist within the rail corridor, and we have separate. So within the one corridor, the corridor will be split into multiple leases. So where So for the Werribee line, for example, Metro has the Metro lines, obviously, as well as the northern side of the Werribee corridor. And the southern side of the Werribee corridor, or the one against the Princes Freeway, is ARTC. So, and it varies. On the Sunbury line, all of the rail corridor is Metros, and V-Line operate on the Metro tracks. It really does vary from line to line. The Craigieburn line, Metro has the Metro lines as well as the western side of the corridor, whereas ARTC has the eastern side of the corridor. Yeah.
Okay. And this is asking you to speak out of turn, as it were, but how do you find are there similar biodiversity programs running with ARTC and V-Line? Is Metro the best, or is?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I work closely with a colleague at V-Line, and they've just started up their own biodiversity program as well. Yeah, and I guess it's really, I find myself often actually reflecting on the different operation models, from V-Line being a state enterprise compared to the Metro, which is almost a corporatized consortium. And the difference I mean, there's lots of differences, but, I guess with a franchise where it's one consortium bidding against another, it provides a competitive environment to provide the best program, right? And that's right across the gamut of services that are provided, from biodiversity to running trains. So it's really interesting to compare the two different models, I suppose, because I know that the V-Line, although they've got a biodiversity program and they're doing great work within that program, they do have challenges of sourcing funding to do some activities that they would like to do. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. Debbie's got her hand up.
I have a few questions. Sorry. The soil that you got for the capping, was that ensured that it had no, limited weed seed in it? Like, how did you get that sort of?
Yeah, good one, Debbie. So we sourced it from below 0.5 metre depth. So yeah, to try and make sure it was weed free as possible. We understood it was from 0.5 to I think about 1 metre depth. Yep.
Okay, and you did some seed testing, I saw too. The other
Yeah,
thing I was going to ask is
not for weed seed though. So we didn't test for weed seed in that capping material because we just inferred that it was such a depth, therefore quite old, because it was original material that would be weed free. There we go. Nick's just mentioned 0.5 to 1.5 metres.
Okay. And the four forbs that you picked for the grassland mix, what were they, and why'd you pick them?
Why did we pick them? I guess we were trying to incorporate within a grass-dominated selection some improved biodiversity to some extent. So we picked a few forbs that we knew or thought would be able to handle the rigorous mowing program. So either forbs that we know grow in a prostrate form or are pretty hardy and can handle regular mowing.
So what were they?
What were they? I might get Nick to jump in here, but I think there was potentially looking at Leptohincus squamatus, Chrysocephalum apiculatum.
Ben, I've got them in front of me, writing the monitoring report not as we speak, but earlier today. So it's Calocephalus citrius, Calocephalus lacteus, Chrysocephalum apiculatum, convolvulus. I think from memory.
Yep. Seems plausible.
So
Did we get
things that will handle mowing potentially, and also things that we had enough seed of to put in the maintenance mix. So the more common things that also won't trigger any EPBC issues if we spread them widely. So.
That's not a bad thing. There's something else I'm going to ask. No, I forgot it. Maintenance. Assuming you're doing weed maintenance, and I'm worried you said it's 2 years. Yeah, from my experience, it takes at least 2 years before that's going to establish. That's all.
Oh, of course, yeah. So as I mentioned, the original concept of the plan was to do it over 10 years, but we had to really confine it within this franchise period. So I guess we're planning for the establishment of the sites within 2 years. So that's, you know, all our planning and approvals to preparing the site to growing the seed and seeding them. But the maintenance will fall into the next franchise period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that'll
plenty
just
of weed control and stuff you're going to do.
Of course, yeah. And that the plan is that will form just part of the biosite program moving forward, because essentially they'll be parts. You know, they'll be part of biosites. They'll be bigger biosites or within a biosite. Yeah.
Looking forward to watching it. Be good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, we're almost at 7:45, so perhaps we should, unless anyone has some really pressing questions that Ben must respond to, shall we thank Ben very much for his time and for the what was a very enlightening and inspiring presentation. Thank you.